Okay. Okay. Hello. Welcome, Abby. We're very excited to have you here. I want to first start off with you are not in the US, correct?
Correct. I am in London, UK.
London, UK. And have you been there your whole life? Were you born and raised?
I was born just outside London, and then I moved to London when I was 18. And then when I guess I was 23, 23, I think, I packed my bags and I left. And I went on a 10-year backpacking trip all around the world. I lived around Southeast Asia in like Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. Then I went to Australia. Then I went to Canada. Then I lived in the States. And then I moved back to London.
And what motivated that trip?
Well, escapism.
Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, straight into it. Much as I've used like drugs and alcohol in the past, I used traveling as a way to escape or try to escape myself, and try to escape my problems. But turns out no matter what country I moved to, and how much alcohol I drank, I still couldn't get away from myself, and my problems, they just stuck around. So I basically just wanted to run away, and it was supposed to be a 6-month backpacking trip. 6 months into it, I was like, no, I'm going to do this forever. Like, why would I go back to the UK and have responsibilities and like a career and like a partner? Why would I do that when I can drink and drug my way around the world? So that's what I did.
So, wow. First of all, wow. Thanks for that. Let's rewind a little. Take it back. I don't want to overwhelm you by saying to childhood, but maybe let's take it back to childhood and like, how did you get to that point?
So I remember growing up as being a very, very sad child. Very, very sad. My father took his own life when I was really, really young, which really, really affected me, which I only kind of realized in the last few years how much that deeply affected me. And so I was raised by my mother, who herself turned to alcohol in order to cope with her pain of losing my father. So she wasn't really around at all, and when she was around, she was generally in blackout, and it was very, very like unloving environment. Like we had a terrible relationship. We're okay now, but we kind of like healed a little bit. But yeah, we had a terrible relationship when I was a little kid, and then when I got into my teens, her alcoholism kind of is progressive disease, right? So her alcoholism got worse, and the abuse got worse. It was very, very emotionally abusive. So I just remember being a young kid and her telling me that she wished I'd never been born, and then saying to me like, kids will ruin your life, never have kids. And so I was really, really little, and I was learning all these things. So I grew up basically. I learned to A, hate myself, and B, to deal with emotions by ignoring them and by drinking them away. And that's basically those were the foundations of my childhood. Those were my developmental years. And so I got to the point where I wanted to run away because I hated myself, and that was my coping mechanism. That's how I was taught to manage my emotions, was just to run and to ignore them and to do whatever in my power to not feel, basically.
So that's childhood. And I think, we've listened to a lot of stories now up until this point, where, things that happen later in life, this temptation to escape, turn to drugs and alcohol, turn to other unhealthy coping mechanisms, they all start from very young ages. And so I know that that's a serious common thread. When in that journey of kind of self-hatred and that relationship with your family, did you start to turn to these coping mechanisms?
I think I think so. I use drugs and alcohol also as a form of self-harm. I think I turned to self-harm from a very early age when I was like maybe like 7 or 8, and then I started. So I'd always use that as kind of a coping mechanism, and then I had my first drink when I was maybe like, I guess I was like 13, and I like, because I would see my mum drinking all the time, and I remember just thinking like, oh, I wonder what's so special about that drink. And then I remember drinking and getting drunk for the first time, and then not feeling myself, like not feeling like I was in my own skin, and it was such a relief. I was like, oh my god, amazing. Like if I drink, then not only am I like punishing myself, this is all subconscious, right? So like not only am I punishing myself by kind of like sabotaging myself, I also don't feel like I'm living in this body that I hate, and I disconnected from the person that I was, who I hated, like with so much disdain, right? Yeah. So I was probably about 13 when I started drinking, and then realizing the kind of effect that it had on me, and that I could forget who I was if I drank.
Right. And so you know, growing up in Europe, I know you traveled a lot.
Mm.
We're obviously in the States. What's the culture of drinking and drugs there? Does that have a big impact? I know they have a younger drinking age than they do in the States. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, so drinking's like, I know it's very similar around the world, but drinking is very like, it's very ingrained in British culture. It's a big part of British culture. The drinking age is 18, but like you're expected to drink and get drunk like from your teenage years, basically. It's completely accepted. It's just normal. Like if you're binge drinking when you're like 14, 15, like it's not weird. That's just like, oh, you're just being a teenager. That's just like you being a kid. And just drinking is very accepted in British culture, and I found that my entire adolescence and my entire adulthood. So it's quite easy to sort of like for it to go unnoticed, because everyone's drinking, everyone hangs out in the pub, like not so much teenagers, not so much now hang out at the pub, but when I was a teenager, so I'm 35 next month, so when I was a teenager in like the early 2000s, drinking ages at pubs just didn't really exist. Like you could get served alcohol as like a 16-year-old. I think they're a bit more strict now, but back then, like, yeah, it's very easy to kind of like fade into the background, and for like drinking problems to go unnoticed because it's just so accepted.
For sure. I imagine that's incredibly and sadly universsul. So at some point in this journey, you must have reached a point that brought you to get sober, or at least try to. Before we get into what that journey was like of trying to get sober, and the ups and downs of that, what got out of hand enough for you to want to get sober?
I feel like it wasn't so much that I chose sobriety. It's more like sobriety chose me. That sounds so lame. It's like when people like buy a dog or something. When I adopt a dog, I didn't choose the dog chose me. But like I was pretty much like I was out of options, right? And so I got sober in 2020, 2.5 years ago. April 1st, 2020 is my sober date. So I was in Canada in early 2020, and I just had the worst year of my life. Like it was just rock bottom after rock bottom after rock bottom. Like I moved to New York with my boyfriend. I lost that relationship due to my absolute like alcoholism and being unstable and unmanageable. And then to deal with that breakup, I started smoking crack. I tried to kill myself. I got put in a psych ward, and then I lost my job because I drank an entire bottle of vodka at work. Like all these things, I was just on this like pure path of self-destruction. Like I didn't want to live anymore. So I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to destroy as much stuff as possible. And I did quite a good job of destroying everything. Like, it was like, yeah, honestly, it was just the worst. And then the pandemic hit. Like, I just lost my job. I was working in a restaurant on Vancouver Island. I just lost my job because of my drinking. And then the pandemic hit, and I was forced to move back to the UK. Like, all the other backpackers and travelers were all moving back to their home countries, so I did as well. And then I used the pandemic as like a cover, that I didn't tell anyone I lost my job because I was like blackout drunk. I told them because it was because of COVID, and it forced me to go back home. I moved back in with my mum, and it was into my childhood house where I grew up, and I carried on binge drinking. I carried like downing spirits, and I was still on my spiral of self-destruction until I think I just been on like a two-week bender, and I woke up one day and I cleared all the bottles out of my room because I'd hidden them like behind my bed. That's what I used to do when I was a teenager. Like or whenever I stayed at my mum's house as an adult, like I'd hide bottles behind the bed, and then take them out to the trash when my mum wasn't looking or when she wasn't home. So I cleared out all these bottles, and I just felt terrible. Like I was hungover. My body was going into withdrawal. I was just so depressed, so sad. And I sat at the end of my bed, and like it was such a weird experience, but I received a message. Like it was like I could hear like a little voice in my head that just told me, like, you don't have to do this anymore. Like, you just don't have to do this anymore. And then all of a sudden everything sort of like made sense. It was like I had just like come up with the answer to like a really complicated algebra question that I'd been like thinking about my entire life. Everything just slotted into place, and I just realized, I was like, oh my god, I need to stop drinking alcohol. Like, alcohol it's destroying me. Like I'm literally about to die. And then I realized I didn't want to die, and it was then that I kind of like completely surrendered to the fact that I'd lost control over my drinking, my substance abuse, my mental health, like everything. Like I just realized I was completely powerless. And then that was a lot of that, and then I haven't drank since then.
Wow.
And wow, what a story. I mean, that moment of reckoning, I haven't heard something like that. I mean, that is like a singular moment in your life that changed everything.
Yeah. And like it's so weird because like I couldn't force that moment. Like
yeah. It sounds like it just came to you when it needed to. And oftentimes we say like it's the person needs to get sober within themselves. It's not someone else who can force that upon them. And it sounds like, I mean, within yourself is an understatement for this. This just completely came to you out of nowhere. And what I was curious about was, how many attempts did it take for you to get sober? But it sounds like this was it.
That was it. I mean, it's not been easy, and I've had like terrible times, and I've had to change my methods of sobriety a couple of times. But yeah, like,
what did you do in those first few weeks to get sober?
So in those first few weeks, the first week my body went through withdrawal. I didn't know that was really dangerous, and that you should not just like stop drinking alcohol if you're a heavy drinker, but I did. And so I was really sick for a week and a bit. Like I was I was like bedridden. So I watched Netflix for a long time. And then like, it was horrible. I had like the shakes, and I was like hallucinating, and I had like fever and cold sweats and stuff. But once I started feeling a bit better, I started I guess seeking community, I suppose, in a way. I remember going on Instagram, and then I unfollowed all like the party accounts and like the drinking meme accounts that I followed. I unfollowed all them, and then I just searched for sober and recovery. And then I just started like following loads of sober meme accounts instead, and people, and then I realized there was like a community of people who were just like me, actually, who were just normal women who just happened to have an alcohol problem.
Yeah.
And then what else did I do? I started my own Instagram page. I started a fashion account. I've always loved fashion. I've always loved styling and photo shoots and stuff like that. So if this was lockdown, this was beginning of lockdown as well. Like we had stay-at-home orders in the UK, and so I couldn't work anyway. Well, I just lost my job and I was recovering from alcoholism. Like, I mean, it was like there was no way I could work. So I knew that I needed something to kind of set my mind to, and something to occupy myself, and I wanted to do something creative. So I started a fashion Instagram account, and I really enjoyed that. Like, and then yeah, I worked out a lot. I did a lot of like yoga and meditation. I downloaded a sobriety app on my phone and started counting my days, which for me was really important because I could see my progress. And every day I was feeling like a little bit stronger. I feel so, you know, the pandemic was a really horrible time for the world, but for me personally, it gave me time and space to reflect and to work on myself, and to like really make these changes in my life that needed to happen. And I had a lot of like time to think, and just self-reflect. I think my method of sobriety in those early days was just focusing on myself. Completely.
Yeah, you got to do that inner work. And when you started getting sober, were you still living with your mom? How was that? I don't know if she's sober now, but I know you mentioned she had her own relationship with alcohol. How was that?
Yeah. It was all right. Like, so she still drinks. Not nearly as much as she used to, but she still does drink to excess. You know what? Like it was all right. Like, my mum's in her like mid-70s now, so she's a very different person to who she was when she was raising me as a young child. And do you know what? I was just too focused on myself to kind of like worry about my relationship with my mother and stuff like that. Like, I think early sobriety and recovery is a time where you can be selfish, and it is all about me, like, you know, like just for now, like it's about me, and I can just focus on myself for a little bit.
Good. I'm glad. I mean, that's important. You got to be selfish so you can give more of yourself to other people. And one common thing we've heard from a lot of interviews with individuals who are sober is believing in something bigger than themselves, because they they're like, I cannot do this alone. I can make the choice, but I do have to believe in a higher power. Do you also have that?
I do now. I didn't start my recovery journey in that way. I just had no idea what I was doing. I literally had no idea. So my first 18 months of sobriety were great. Like, I was like, oh my God, I fixed all my problems. Everything's fine now. Like, I've stopped drinking. I'm like a responsible adult. Everything's gonna be great. And then about 18 months down the line, kind of reality hit, and I had to live with myself, and the euphoric high of early sobriety had worn off, and I was like, oh shit, what do I do now? And then I entered a 12-step program. I didn't know what else to do. Like, when I look back on this, like, I with my recovery, I feel like I've had two moments of surrender. The first time was when I surrendered to the fact that I'd lost control of my drinking. I'd lost control of my mental health, and everything was a mess. That was my first moment of surrender. My second moment of surrender was when I was about 18 months in, and I realized I couldn't do it on my own anymore. like up until that point, I'd done everything by myself. And so I kind of just threw my hands in the air, surrendered, and said, I can't do this by myself anymore. So I entered a 12-step program, and yes, and now very much I believe in the power of community and connecting to other people who have, like, there's nothing like it, like connecting to someone who has the same kind of problems as you, who's dealing with the same kind of stuff as you. Like, it's just magic happens when you connect to someone in that way. And you know, so yeah, that's what's bigger than me. That's a power, that's a force that's bigger than me, that connection.
Yeah.
And when that connection is difficult to access, I'm thinking during COVID, I'm thinking on like a normal day that maybe you're home alone. What do you turn to when you hit lows?
When I hit lows now, well, now I call my sponsor. She loves it. All the time I'm like, hey, it's me. Yeah, also I go to the gym a lot. I work out a lot. I meditate a lot. Like that's like a connection to myself, like in meditation. And I like stuff like mindfulness, and you know, it's not for everyone. It's not something that everyone can necessarily access. But it's something that it helps me connect to myself, and even that connection to my, like, my truest form, like that really helps me.
That is the goal of it, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, you've been through a lot since you were a tiny kid up until now, and life continues, so I'm sure you'll have more wisdom to share with us. But what are kind of some like big lessons that you've people screaming? Do you hear that? Literally people screaming.
oh my God.
I'm in a college dorm.
Maybe they should come on.
I'll restate the question once people stop screaming. One sec, they're leaving. Okay, they're gone. I'm curious about what kind of tokens of wisdom you've learned from going through all of this since childhood until now, that you can share with us and our listeners, people who maybe went through similar things as a child, maybe did not, but had similar emotions.
I would back up what we've just been discussing, is you don't have to do it alone. And I thought for so long, for into adulthood, in fact, up until like the last year, I just had this belief that I was a burden, and then this belief that I could do it myself, and other people are just going to interfere, and you know, I just want to do it my way. And the thing is, my way got me to the point where I was a depressed alcoholic who was smoking crack. Like that was my way. So that's the biggest thing I've learned, is to connect with other people, reach out for support, because support is there. People want to help, and you can't do it alone. You just can't. And there's no, I don't like it. It was a very big step for me to be able to kind of surrender and reach out for help. But once I did, like, it's, you know, it's like it's sharing the unbearable weight of these problems that we have, whether they be mental or addiction based, you know. That would be my main piece of wisdom, is that you don't have to do this alone.
Yeah, that's what unfortunately a lot of people have said. We try to do it alone and it didn't work so long. So I appreciate you saying that and being vulnerable in that sense, being like, I give this, you know, I'm surrendering. I cannot do this alone. I think it's very vulnerable, but also, you know, just amazing choice and for the better. So I very appreciate you saying that. Also, so it's on your Instagram, you have a recovery journal. Is that something you made and you're like, I wish I had that during the beginning of my recovery? Or is it just something you started for yourself to guide, you know, your own journey through recovery, and now you have it for others? I think it's absolutely amazing.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that you you like it. Yeah, it was pretty much like what I wish I had when I was starting out with my recovery journey. So I wrote a gratitude list every morning and every night. And then I said like affirmations in the mirror and stuff like that. So yeah, I wanted to kind of have to take like little bits of methods that I found really helpful in early sobriety and just put them all into like a guided prompted journal. So it's all like super simplified and it's all there for people. It's like, right, just do this in the morning, fill out these things. It will take 2 minutes, and then do the same at night, and then little by little we'll start to feel a bit better. It's mostly about like self-reflection. So it's like because that really helped me, and it's something that's difficult to kind of just do, like just sit down like, oh, I'm going to reflect on myself. Like that's a strange concept. So I figured like if having like a super simple journal that prompts these questions that help you self-reflect, that will give people a better insight into what they're feeling, how they're doing, and then also tracking progress. I found that so helpful. Like just, it is one day at a time. So I think like, yeah, counting my days in early sobriety like was super important to me. Not so much anymore, but in those early days, because just every day when I was like, oh my God, I've not drunk for a week, I've not drunk for 8 days, for 9 days, like it's such an amazing sense of achievement, and it just spurred me on. So I thought, yeah, tracking progress I thought was important too.
Yeah, I think it's so cute. And I think also if somebody's not sober, it's just good to do that. It's kind of like the 5-minute journal, the 5-minute journal. It's kind of like that.
Yeah.
That's what I thought of when I saw it. I thought it was so cute.
Yeah. Love the 5 minutes. Yeah.
So kind of wrapping up,
mm-hmm.
for individuals who are thinking about being sober, say forever, but maybe they're having a hard time with that concept because forever is, we can't wrap our minds around that.
Yeah.
What is some advice you have for them? Is it day by day, like you just said?
Yeah, one day at a time. Like, I think it's important to keep it in the day and just to focus on what's happening now. Because like you said, like thinking of forever like is like mind bending. And then also, we don't know what's going to happen. Like life is unpredictable. So just thinking about today and how you can best serve yourself today. And in many instances, that will be to stay sober. And then just 24 hours at a time, I think problems are easier to face when we break them down.
Yeah, that's nice. That's honestly true.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Bar. I appreciate it. And Jackie, did you have any?
I'm so grateful for you coming on here. You have so much wisdom to share with us. I mean, I'm super young and learned a ton from your story. So I can imagine what other people are going to gain from this too. And you can plug your social media if you want. I know you have a pretty good following, but we'll at you and stuff. But
nice.
We're just so excited to have spoken to you. And I think your story is going to help a lot of people.
Amazing. I've loved chatting to you both.
Yeah, no, again, thank you for coming on, your time and your energy and your spunk. We appreciate it so much. I loved hearing how you rediscovered yourself, and it's very respectable, and you should be so proud of yourself, Abby. That was such a great story, and I love that for you, and I hope you continue to have many, many happy days ahead of you. Thank you again. I'll be emailing you this episode. I'm going to stop recording, actually. I forgot to do that. Hold on.